Usha Vance was used to staying out of the spotlight. She had always quietly watched history unfold, choosing to remain in the background, as a wife, a mother, and a lawyer. But on Inauguration Day 2025, everything changed.
I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
JD Vance's voice rang out strong, each word of the oath cutting through the solemn atmosphere. Usha stood beside him, her eyes following her husband, but her mind was elsewhere. For years, she had chosen to keep her life private, focusing on law, family, and staying far away from politics. But today, none of that mattered anymore. Today, everything had changed. Not because of power, not because of fame, but because of something else, something deeply personal, her daughter. This story isn't just about America's new second lady. This is a story about a mother. Usha Vance was used to staying away from the cameras. To most people, she was simply known as JD Vance's wife. But Usha had never been just a wife. She was intelligent, she was strong, and above all, she was private. Unlike the spouses of many other politicians, she had never craved attention. To the public, Usha had always been the woman behind JD's success, the quiet, unwavering supporter who never stepped into the spotlight. But then, one day, the world saw her in a completely different way. The only person smarter than JD Vance is his wife. And now, she's no longer standing behind him. They are the perfect couple. Praise echoed from all directions, but Usha didn't care. She had never done any of this for recognition. She was Usha Chilukuri, born and raised in a family that valued education and discipline. She attended Yale University, then continued her path at the prestigious Yale Law School. And it was there that she met JD Vance, a man whose life story couldn't have been more different from hers. Usha had grown up in a stable household where everything followed structure, goals, and plans. JD? He grew up in poverty, instability, and a fractured family. By all logic, they shouldn't have belonged together, but somehow they did. Late one night in the Yale library, JD had asked her,
"Don't you think I'm too different? I grew up in a world nothing like yours."
Usha had simply smiled and shaken her head. Different doesn't mean incompatible.
I don't care where you come from, JD. I care about who you are.
And that was what made JD fall in love with her. She never saw him as a success story or a man who beat the odds. She simply saw him. She pushed him forward, never letting him make excuses for his hardships. If he wanted success, he had to work for it, choosing between family and politics. Their love wasn't the kind that made headlines. There were no grand proposals, no over-the-top romantic gestures, just deep respect, unwavering trust, and a single promise: to always stand by each other. That promise was tested when JD wrote Hillbilly Elegy, the book that made him famous overnight. Interviews, media attention, and politics swept in like a storm, and people weren't just interested in JD. They wanted to know about her, about their marriage. Usha didn't like it. She cherished her privacy. She didn't want to be a public figure. But she stood by JD, never letting fame change who she was. And yet, nothing could have prepared them for what would happen on Inauguration Day. Today wasn't about fame or politics. Today was about family. JD Vance had come a long way, from an author to a senator to the Vice President of the United States. But one thing never changed. Usha always protected their family's privacy. They weren't like other political families. No carefully curated family portraits on magazine covers, no long interviews about their parenting methods. If you weren't paying close attention, you might not even know how many children they had. That was intentional. JD and Usha had 3 children, and among them was Mirabel, their youngest daughter. She was too young to understand politics. But somehow, on this day, she became the moment that changed everything for Usha. Usha knew one undeniable truth: children in politics never escape scrutiny. The whispers, the judgmental stares, the crushing weight of public expectation. She had seen it happen to many political families, and she never wanted the same fate for her children. But with JD's rising position, she understood that shielding their family from the public eye was becoming increasingly difficult. JD had grown up in an unstable environment. Violence, poverty, and deep family fractures had haunted his childhood. That was why he longed to build a solid, loving home for his children, something he himself had never known. Usha was different. She had been raised in a traditional Indian household, where discipline and ambition were non-negotiable. She believed that children needed structure, needed to be taught how to think, to be curious about the world, but also to understand their boundaries. Two opposing philosophies. Yet together they had created a delicate balance, strict yet loving, protective yet never suffocating. JD once teased her during a debate about parenting.
I just want them to have freedom. I don't want them growing up with a million rules like you did. Usha raised an eyebrow.
Her tone playfully sharp.
And I don't want them growing up and writing a book about their traumatic childhood like you did.
They were different. But that was exactly why they worked so well together. JD's career soared, but their family remained the same. No public displays of wealth. No curated family moments on social media. No long-winded interviews about parenting strategies. Just simple, quiet nights. JD reading bedtime stories, Usha patiently helping you on with a tough math problem, laughter filling the kitchen as they cooked together. But politics never lets anyone escape. As JD's prominence grew, so did the questions. Is he really raising his children the way he preaches? Are they truly the perfect family, or just an image crafted for the cameras? The speculation was endless. Usha knew about it, but she didn't care. As long as her children were happy and safe, that was all that mattered. But then came the bigger question. Should they bring Mirabel to the inauguration? A historic moment. An event the entire nation would witness. Would their children regret missing it in the future? But bringing Mirabel also meant exposing her to the world. There would be no turning back. Cameras, reporters, public scrutiny. Nothing would shield her from it anymore. Usha wrestled with the decision. She watched Mirabel playing with her stuffed animals, giggling, blissfully unaware of how harsh the world outside could be. She had no idea what was coming. JD placed a hand on Usha's shoulder.
Let's just let things happen naturally, okay?
Usha looked up at her husband.
And what if things don't go as we hope?
She asked, her voice quiet but firm. JD chuckled softly.
We've been through worse, haven't we? You think this time will be any different?
She stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. The whole family would go. Not for politics, not for approval, but for family. Usha had never wanted attention. As a lawyer, she was trained to think fast, not to seek the spotlight. Even when JD's career took off, she stayed behind the scenes, choosing to support him, rather than step into the limelight herself. But today, none of that mattered anymore. Because whether she liked it or not, the world was watching. She had never asked for this role. Political spouses often had duties, public appearances, speeches, charity work. Some used their platform to champion causes they believed in. Some simply accepted the attention as part of the life they had chosen. But Usha? If she could, she would have kept everything the same, raising her children, supporting JD quietly from the background. But now she had no choice. Usha didn't like political games. She despised the feeling of being constantly observed, every move analyzed, every word dissected. But she knew that if she wanted to protect her family, she had to control how the world perceived her. So, she chose her appearances carefully, attending the crucial events, avoiding the unnecessary ones. When she spoke, she kept it brief and clear. She didn't want to be a public figure. She just wanted to be herself. But what worried her most wasn't herself. It was her children. They never chose this life. Yet as JD's career advanced, the public began demanding to see not just him, but his family. They wanted to see the father, the husband, and that meant the children could no longer remain hidden. Today, Usha stood there, clutching Mirabel's hand. She glanced at JD, watching as he took his place behind the podium, preparing to take his oath. She knew that the moment he finished speaking, everything would change forever.
I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
JD's voice was steady, unwavering. And then, Mirabel. She stood right beside her mother, wide-eyed, tiny hands clutching the hem of her coat. She was too young to fully grasp what was happening, but something inside her told her this was a moment that mattered. Mirabel had never known a life outside the public eye. From the moment she was born, she had been placed under the glare of cameras, even though she had never chosen it. But today, right now, she was here, at the center of history. Usha thought she was prepared, but as her gaze landed on her daughter, something inside her shifted. A feeling impossible to put into words, a mix of pride, worry, and a vague, unspoken fear. Then, before she could process what was happening, the camera flashes erupted. They had caught the moment. The world would remember this day for many reasons, but for Usha, only one moment truly mattered, and it was happening now. The crisp, Washington, D.C. air settled over the city as millions watched the inauguration. January 20, 2025, a day of transition, a day of new beginnings, but the weather had other plans. A sharp gust of wind blew through the Capitol, the gray sky heavy with the promise of snow. For security reasons, the ceremony was moved inside the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol, a grand yet more intimate space that brought the Vice President and his family closer to the gathered crowd. Usha didn't care about the change. No matter where they stood, she wanted just one thing, to stay away from the spotlight. But even here, the world's eyes were on her husband, JD Vance, the man standing before the podium, ready to take his oath. And that meant they were watching her, too. Usha's blush pink coat stood out among the sea of dark winter attire. She hadn't meant to draw attention. She had never cared for political fashion. But within minutes, social media had already dubbed it a symbol of grace and warmth. Beside her, their three children, Yuan, Vivek, and Mirabel, stood neatly in line, dressed impeccably. They added a touch of warmth to the otherwise solemn event. And then there was Mirabel, the 3-year-old everyone assumed was too young to understand. She leaned into her mother, wide-eyed, taking everything in. Her tiny fingers were wrapped in colorful band-aids, a telltale sign of an energetic little girl. Then, a moment of pure sweetness. The camera zoomed in, capturing Mirabel sucking her thumb, her eyes filled with curiosity. Within minutes, the image spread across the internet. A tender moment in a formal event. Usha didn't realize that another moment was about to be captured. Her 7-year-old son Yuan had grown restless from standing too long. He reached up, tugging at his mother's hair. Usha remained composed. When he tried again, she gently took his hand and whispered something, not too loud, but just enough for him to know now was not the time for play. Not long after, social media was flooded with comments. Second lady, or just a mother holding it all together. Today was about politics, but this moment was about family. As the oath ceremony continued, Usha held her composure. She was used to long speeches, she was used to Yuan's impatience, but nothing could have prepared her for Mirabel's transformation. The child who had always hid behind her mother, always shied away from the cameras, was no longer timid today. Dressed in her deep red coat, Mirabel stood tall, not clinging to her mother, not lowering her gaze. She observed everything, her eyes sparkling with a quiet confidence Usha had never seen before. A small change, but it hit Usha like a wave. She had spent years shielding her children from the public eye. She had worked tirelessly to keep Mirabel away from all of this. But today, in the heart of a historic event, she realized that change had already arrived. Usha reached up and wiped away a tear, a moment few would notice. She whispered,
I refuse to accept this.
Then, in a softer voice filled with emotion,
But I suppose I have no choice.
her daughter would always find her own way. This story is not just about a political moment. It is about motherhood, growth, and a mother watching her child step beyond the safety of her arms into the world. Usha had spent her life protecting her children from the public eye, shielding them from pressures she knew they would inevitably face. She had held Mirabel close, guarding her from things she believed her daughter wasn't ready to confront. But how long can a mother truly protect her child? There are moments in life when we realize that we cannot hold on forever to those we love. There are days, seconds even, when we must step back and let them walk forward alone. And that is what Usha realized today. Mirabel, the little girl who once clung to her mother's hand, who once hid behind her whenever strangers approached, was now standing tall, looking ahead with quiet confidence. No one told her to do it. No one taught her to be this way. It was instinct. It was growth. It was a turning point that no mother can control. And that broke Usha's heart. Not because she didn't want Mirabel to grow up, but because for the first time, she realized her daughter no longer needed her in the same way she once had. Perhaps every mother faces this moment. The moment they look at their child and realize they are ready to face the world. And all they can do is stand there, accept it, and understand that part of motherhood is learning to let go. Usha wiped away her tears. Today, her daughter had chosen her own path. And all a mother can do is watch, hope, and love. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to share your thoughts about the story and let us know which city you're watching from. We'd love for you to share its message by liking and sharing it with your friends, helping us reach our first milestone of 1,000 subscribers, which means the world to us and allows us to create more meaningful stories for you. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you in our next story.